Greetings, gamers, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 2 of Ropai Gamma, the Gamers Podcast. I'm your GM, Byron, and of course with me is my co-host, Howard.
Greetings, everyone.
And joining us tonight is kind of a special guest. I would say special guest. Is Miri. She is, of course, a fellow gamer. She's actually part of my Epic game. She is our previous lovely co-host's Uber fan of her webcomic. And she is currently the kind of head editor of this season. Because she knows what she's doing and I don't.
Yep.
Hi.
So, hello, Miri.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So, okay. So, yay! Second episode.
It continues.
Yes. And yay for being on YouTube and all that, and getting stuff actually posted, and yay. I'm trying to think if there's anything really different aside from the fact that we're doing a second episode between now and the last one, but I can't really... Howard, anything with you? I mean...
Yeah, actually, MomoCon went really well.
Yes. I was actually wondering about that. How, tell details now.
All right, so I did. This is the first time I've actually done a Justice in Life event at a major convention, which is kind of cool.
Oh, sweet.
And considering that I'm been the nominated, I guess, the global collaboration for Shinetar currently, this was actually a collaborative event with another group in world in a town called Farwatch, who just before the convention actually put themselves under the command of my NPC. And I believe today another group put themselves under the command of my NPC, so I think that puts me in charge of three actual PC groups.
Nice.
One of them being in Illinois, one of them being in somewhere on the eastern seaboard, and then of course my local game. But the collaborative event that we were talking about, this one was actually one that was working with a group in Farwatch. And the interesting thing is that so we started doing the collaborative event with Farwatch, and we have two concurrent storylines. One dealing with darkness, which is one of the evil elements in Shinetar, a resurgent of darkness.
Imprisoned in me. Sorry.
Yes. Yes. Actually, but
really? Oh, okay.
Actually, kind of it is. But what happened was apparently it's kind of a cool story. Apparently, before Shinetar became Shinetar, it actually originated as Sean Patrick Fannon's personal world that he played his games in, kind of like your Star Wars game and my Star Wars game. Anyway.
Yeah,
well,
actually, if I remember correctly, because we interviewed him last season, he started it with the. There was this one pre-gen adventure, like the border keep or something like that. That's where it all got started.
Yeah,
so.
and so in that game, they created a backstory for a lot of the worlds and stuff, or the towns and places, and one of them was a place called Farwatch. And Farwatch, at some point in the past, darkness actually reigned for 3 years.
Oh wow!
Vampires and necromancers got a foothold, and then this is where things get weird. Have you ever This is where the world just shifts. And when I heard about this, I'm still to this day going, what? So you have darkness and you have flame. Shianor and the Kalinar Empire. Darkness is Shianor, flame is Kalinar. We all clear on that? Evil. Yes. Just different kinds of evil. One is a corruption, necromantic evil. One is a flame, rar, eat you evil. That's
flame, rar, eat you evil. Yes, thank you for being so descriptive there, Howard.
So, anyway, apparently a faction of Cal, the Kalinar Empire, flame, rar, eat you evil, actually cleansed Farwatch of the corruption, corrupt you evil.
Okay.
Leaving Farwatch without either, actually. So one evil ate the other evil, and left Farwatch kind of alone in a
cannibalistic evil. Yum.
Yes, I don't even know how to describe.
Well, it's not necessarily cannibalistic because it is two aspects of evil. This actually is not all that uncommon,
except in Shinetar.
Well, okay, maybe in Shinetar, but I'm talking about in other genres, other stories. it's not like very common, but it's not rare.
Well-
There's you've got your like central evil, but then sometimes you have this other evil that the two evils don't like each other. Perfect example being Wheel of Time.
Yes.
With the Dark One and Shadow Logoth, both evil but hate each other.
No, and I get that. And actually, it was only a faction of Cal that wiped out a faction of Darkness or Shinar. But it's weird that they left it alone. So then, So you got Farwatch is chilling there, but Darkness doesn't give up without a fight. Infections typically stick around. There's always like side infections, systemic. So what we came up with is he came up with ideas like, okay, well they held for 3 years, which means they spread. Just because you cleared it in the center area doesn't mean the spreading infection got stopped, because Cal didn't stick around to cleanse the entire countryside. They just burned this one village and kept going. So he came up with the idea of having more darkness in the area. I played off that idea, and so that's one of the things we're building on. In addition to, of course, that kind of evil, there's a different kind of evil, and the famous line that I said is, Red Store, we're not supernatural evil, we're just dicks.
Yeah.
That evil, which is a mundane, just sort of like corruption of greed and backstabbing evil. They also have a presence, and so we have these two concurrent storylines with Red Store and with Darkness, and I was able to tie in the Red Store storyline into my Justice Life campaign. So not only was it a Just in Life official campaign, my first ever at a major convention, but it was also a collaborative campaign for local collaboration, which is also kind of a first. Sean does collaborative stuff in that Sean creates stuff and we have to collaborate with it. I did some. He is the creator. Like, I'm not. That's just the way it works. Yes, I actually built in it's a tied-in storyline. So now the other group, and while that was going on, the same weekend that was going on, this is what tickles me pink. Okay, so the same weekend that I was running that, in the hills of, I think, Tennessee, I know that sounds creepy, in the hills of Tennessee, I think, another guy with the Shattered Warbands was actually running a game in my hometown, like in Astronaut, using maps that I created and NPCs I created, right? He actually went off my last storyline, did something, went down, and then he fought the darkness that Farwatch is fighting. Also, he left one NPC and 2 PCs in my hometown to help me solve a puzzle with yet a third storyline dealing with the Crimson Crusade, which is one of the 2 major meta arcs that Sean Patrick Fannin is putting forward. All of that happened this weekend.
That's pretty awesome.
Damn.
Yes.
Especially using stuff that you made.
Yes, and I am trying to keep track of all the storylines and when stuff happens, and my brain is
So
getting
if you ever feel inadequate as a GM, you're probably listening to Howard.
I'm telling you, man, but it's awesome. I mean, the fact of the matter is that all these storylines are happening concurrently. All these games are happening, different games. But what I need people to understand, these aren't modules, guys. These are actually people just running home games, and they're all working together. It's freaking amazing. So
that sounds awesome.
It is. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
As they put it, is the first MMO tabletop game.
It's worth it. It's totally worth it. So that's since the last podcast and this podcast, that's what happened.
Awesome.
Wait, did I tell you about the pirate attack thing? Did that happen? Oh my god. So yeah. Also, the coolest scene I've ever had in my Wednesday night thing happened this past week too.
Do tell.
Okay, so they were infiltrating.
I feel like I'm bursting with freaking ideas here right at the moment.
No. They were infiltrating a pirate organization, a large pirate organization in Star Wars, in order to fight. The pirates had actually previously hit a rebel installation and stolen a piece of information, actually a piece of tech that had information, a data cube, and the player characters were sent to recover it. So they infiltrated the pirate group, posing to be potential pirates, and they got sent on their first mission with the pirates. Well, the first mission was a slaving mission to attack this colony and round up all these things because they were both pirates and slavers. So they get back. Well, you have the pilot, the tech, the one NPC grunt, and then you have the face character. Well, the face character kind of took exception to the whole slaving thing and decided to storm into the pirate throne room during their celebration of the recent successful adventure and berate the pirate lord right there in front of 100 of his minions. which didn't go so well. And then so the pilot character, the fighter pilot character, went up to had a little quiet powwow with the pirate lord to try to save the situation. And the pirate lord's like, well, you have a choice. You can either throw your friend over there, the talky one, the one that the idiot, throw him in with the slaves and sell him into slavery, or you all get thrown into the slave pits. At which point the pilot said, well, I'm only in this for the money, and then tried to shoot the pirate lord in the face. Then descended into a Benny Hill type run through the thing being chased by pirates. It was hilarious. It was well played by everybody. More to the point, the poor damn tech was, sitting there and, fixing up the fighter, has no idea what's going on, hears a ruckus, looks up, and pirates just start shooting at him. No clue what's going on! And the whole time the Benny Hill thing was going through my head as they're running down the corridors, and the other two guys, like, this was all done online, so there's a lot of whispering going on, so no one knew what the other group was, or the other characters were doing. So all of a sudden just shit goes downhill, and they're running down the corridor screaming at each other, what the hell did you say? I don't know, what did you say? It's all part of the plan. We have a plan? It was perfect.
That sounds amazing.
They did get out. The pilot landed the fighter, but he got a critical wound with 32 damage in one hit. So by the time they pulled him out of his fighter, he was basically he was dying or almost dead, and his flight suit was just filled with blood. I mean they picked him up and blood just started pouring out of his boots. But he managed to retain consciousness long enough to bring the fighter into land, and then passed out for blood loss. So it ended with him being rushed to the emergency room to try to save his life. Amazing scene.
Damn.
And that is my story. Those are my two big stories for the week.
Yeah, I got nothing.
I got nothing. I don't think we can top that.
Well, okay, we haven't done Epic Game. That's why.
Huh?
We didn't do Epic Game, that's why.
Yeah, that's because I went down to North Carolina to a friend of ours, as he was finally graduating college. And I say finally because technically he started taking college classes like 15 years ago. It wasn't because he was like failing or anything. He just, for the longest time, he didn't know what he wanted to major in. And then when he finally decided, of course, and he was, of course, having to work. He got married, got a house through the span of me knowing him, actually. So, but he was finally graduating, so he and his wife were throwing a graduation party, and just about everyone that I connected with and that I gamed with down in G Vegas, I actually got to see this last weekend. At least. So what?
What did he graduate with? That's what I want to know.
He graduated with a BS in was it computer science? Focusing on information technology with a minor in business and networking, I think. So,
That's what he's doing.
I think.
Sounds cool.
And actually, he's got so many freaking credits that he could go back and like pick up another couple of minors if he wanted, which I think he joked about maybe doing. But
you mean degrees, not people, right?
Huh? Oh God, Howard. Anyway, but yeah, like all the people that I would like want to get back in touch with down in North Carolina, except for two, which I have been in touch with. I just haven't seen them in person in a couple of years. And that'd be Matt and Allison, and we're actually going to see them this weekend, as they're coming up to visit DC with Allison's parents. So actually, in the span of a week, I've reconnected with like everyone that I gamed with down in North Carolina, and it was fun. It was great, but it was also kind of strange because also kind of like I missed these people. So, and of course, we told a lot of war stories and whatnot. And actually, it was also my wife's and mine's 7th year anniversary this weekend. So John,
Congratulations, dude, by the way.
no, thank you. So John actually ran a one-shot Werewolf the Apocalypse game. So that's actually like the first full-blown werewolf game I've played in.
How was
Um,
it?
It was good. It was good. John, well, I mean, first and foremost, John's a rather good, experienced GM to begin with. But World of Darkness, like the old World of Dark, the good World of Darkness.
All right, public service announcement. If you are a fan of the new World of Darkness, we do not in any way wish to diminish you as a player or your interest in the system. The opinions expressed by the host are not necessarily opinions of the podcast as a whole. Continue.
Thank you for that. But he really knows World of Darkness. I mean that's his setting. That's his system. Because he's been playing it since Vampire first came out, like in beta. So and Vampire and Werewolf are the ones that he does the best. So I actually learned quite a bit because like my experience with World of Darkness, given the fact that I have a thing for vampires, of course I was focusing on Vampire a lot. I know enough information to get by on Mage, Werewolf, Hunter, and I know a little Changeling. At least I know what it is, kind of. But
My dad
no,
used to play
I
Changeling.
huh?
My dad used to play Changeling.
Oh, okay. But like John at one point in time had ran me in a little intro game of Werewolf, but it only lasted like a session, and we didn't really get into the mechanics of it. And he ran me an intro game in Mage long enough for me to kind of start to get a feel for it before he slapped that thing down. Because in his opinion, Mage is great for players, but for GMs only if you want psychiatric help afterwards. Because for GMs, it's apparently a pain in the arse. But I learned a lot. I actually got more, just from that one game, I got more knowledge, more information than what I had read about Werewolf and what his little intro game had done. So it was good. And of course, I got to play with most of the group that was there, and I actually met some new people. And one of them played as well. So yeah, I had fun with that.
Sounds fun.
Huh?
I've dabbled in all of those worlds, Mage, Werewolf, and Vampire in the past. I enjoyed the games that I played. I was never really sold on the system. Actually, I think of all the ones built on that particular D10 system, Exalted is one of the more entertaining of the group.
Yeah, and actually, because apparently some of the other players had a little experience with Exalted as well. And Exalted is the one I've had the most usage as a player, mechanics-wise, thanks actually to Matt. And so I kept noticing a bit of the differences between Werewolf, the D10 mechanics for World of Darkness and the D10 mechanics for Exalted, because I mean they're made by the same company, but there are some subtle differences, and some of which actually are not so subtle. And one of which Liz reminded me as we were rolling that the D10 system for World of Darkness, at least the old version, because I'm not quite sure if this is still the same in the new one, is sometimes called the whiff system. Because what it is you have a dice pool. And unlike Exalted, the GM tells you your difficulty, which is the number you have to meet or beat on your dice to receive a success. And this can change. Like, the standard is like a 6 or a 7. You have to roll a 6 or a 7 on a D10. But, if you have, like, some modifiers or something, it can go down to, like, a 4 or 5, or it can go up to, like, a 9. If you roll a 10, you have the option of rolling another die. It's kind of like getting a 6 on the wild. You have the option of rolling another die, and, of course, if that's a success, then great. If that's a 10, you can keep going. The only problem is that if you roll a 1 on any of your dice, those negate successes. So, and sometimes you actually don't want to roll an extra die if you get a 10, because if that 10 is your only success, if you roll another die and get a 1, that cancels your success. So, usually if you get a 10, you only want to roll it if you've got a couple other success, because a success means that you do succeed. But the more successes you get, the better you succeed. Especially in combat, because like the more successes you get to hit, you get to add to your damage, which is helpful when you're dealing with a 9 foot tall, starling, chainsaw death beast, or a blood sucking vampire that takes can take a freaking cannon to start damaging. But yeah, it's because of the whole ones negating the successes. I mean, you can have a dice pool of like 15 dice, which in that game is a lot, because your stats usually only go up to 5 to begin with. You have your attributes, where you have your abilities, and then your attributes, which is basically in D6 terms is your attributes and your skills, and you add those together. So like if you're, say, shooting someone, it'd be a Dex plus firearms roll. You take how many dots you have in Dex, how many dots you have in firearms. You roll that many dice. And there might be other modifiers. So I mean, you can have like 15 dice and not succeed at all, because either ones are negating your successes or you just didn't roll high enough. And that was one of the reasons why Liz didn't like the system a whole lot. Although Exalted's a little better. Exalted, the ones, you only botch if you get a 1 and no successes. Ones don't do anything, don't counteract successes. And I think that's partially because Exalted's supposed to be, I mean, you're a starting character is supposed to be a fracking demigod to begin with. So, I mean, it's true. I mean, the whole fact of being Exalted is the gods have chosen you, and you are now, about 100 times better than your average. I mean, a single beginning Exalted can take out a whole legion of ordinary people. Easy. So, but of course, the only problem is there are things, you might be a demigod, but there are other demigods and full-blown gods running around the world. So, but yeah, I mean, overall, just the story, which of course is what I liked about the old World of Darkness to begin with, was the setting and the story. I got a lot of exposure to that very quickly, which I was very kind of happy for. So, and I learned a lot more about Werewolf than I did previously, which for me is a win. And I think I'm done ranting.
Okay.
So, normally I'm actually pestering our guest, for some history and whatnot, but
I don't really know what I have to contribute here.
well, normally if we're doing an interview, which we're not, you're a special guest. We're not interviewing you this time.
This time.
I normally ask the age-old question of how you got into gaming, but I think I actually mentioned this in the first episode, because I mentioned that you were in my Epic game, that your parents were gamers, and I think my exact word was you had the kind of childhood that those of us, once we got into gaming, wish we had, in the sense that you pretty much got it from the cradle.
Well, I can say that some of my earliest memories are being toted with my parents over to their friend's house and sitting at a little plastic table coloring while listening to, crap! Natural one! What do I do now? Or, oh boy, you failed! Stuff like that. And I have vague memories of my parents slaving away over those old gaming mats with the smell of vis-a-vis markers everywhere.
Yep. Pretty much like I said.
You're one of the first generation. You're one of the first generation to actually have that experience, considering gaming, reached its, really infancy was in the 70s. I mean, there was some in the 60s, but really in the 70s was the first. So you're part of the first generation of children raised in home with gamers. It's kind of an interesting thing because, again, there are not a lot of you around right now. Now, 10, 20 years down the road, there will be a lot of kids like that, but it has to be fascinating.
Mm-hmm. It kind of is, and it's a little strange because most people don't have parents like mine, even in my generation. So it's like all of my friends are like, your parents actually let you do stuff. It's cool. Or your parents like the kinds of things that we like. Can we hang out with your parents more often? Most people don't get those questions.
Yeah. I actually, in my entire... Good Lord, I don't even want to calculate right at the moment how long I've been gaming. God, I feel old enough when I talk to you, Miri. But in my entire experience of gaming, I've only run across one other person that is like you that had gamers for parents, and that was a girl at AIW. So yeah, out of my God, it's got to be 19, 20 some odd years, give or take, now of gaming, I've only run across two of you. Now, of course, I've run across members of the older generation, you know, the ones that were there when it started. I've run across plenty of them, but I've only run across two, you know, next generation gamer, you know, children. So,
Am I allowed to make Byron feel bad, Howard?
Yeah, certainly. That's actually part of the podcast. One of the nice things about
hey, why?
Byron, you've officially been gaming probably about as long as I've been alive.
Oh dear God. You know what? Fine. Fuck it. Let me do the math. Talk amongst yourselves for just a moment.
I started in 1997 is when I started.
Well, yeah, that's because I started you.
Howard started when I was 4 years old.
There you go.
Doesn't that make you feel old, dude?
A bit, but then on the other hand, you know, I mean, I'm a reenactor, and you know, I'm talking to trained reenactors that, like, when I was 14, I started. They were, you know, in diapers. So. Come on, Byron.
Okay, it hasn't quite been that long. My calculation is 17, 18 years, give or take.
Okay.
Because it was around 97, 96.
Yeah, so she would probably you started before. So yeah, you would have been 3 when he started gaming.
Yep.
Yeah, give or take 2 or 3.
2 or 3.
I'm not entirely sure because I don't exactly remember. I think it was my sophomore year of high school, which would have been 95, 96.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So taking at the longest. Oh yeah, okay. Take it about the longest time. Yeah, I've been gaming for about 19 years, which of course means I've been GMing for only 1 year shy of that. Because it didn't take long before I got behind the bloody screen. So yeah, I've been gaming almost as long as you've been alive. Yeah, that just wow. Okay, I'm just gonna cry now.
Don't cry, Byron. It's okay.
No, the really funny part is that means that she's been gaming almost as long as I have.
I have not actually been gaming that long. I've been around gaming that long. My dad actually refuses to game with anybody under the age of 12, 13, because he doesn't think that they're mature enough to handle it.
I kind of agree with that. I don't.
I kind of agree with that. Although we actually had an instance on the podcast. We found an article where this one graphic designer and gamer dumbed down, I think it was 4th edition, a little further, which is a feat in amongst itself, because his 9-year-old son for his birthday wanted to play D&D with his friends. So the guy made characters, really kind of simplified the rules a bit more, and created an adventure for them and ran it. And he said it was a complete success. So it can be done. You really got to know what you're doing, and you really got to have the right kids. But
I read an article where somebody who had actually created a specific game system for kids, 6 to 10, with themes from Saturday morning cartoon shows and stuff like that.
I think I heard about that once, and it might have been from you actually. I don't remember, but I remember hearing about that before too.
Mm-hmm.
So
craziness.
Yeah.
But
anyway, so what's up?
What? Huh?
It sounded like you were about to say something, Miri.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. You sure?
I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm sure. Even if I was, I don't remember it now.
Yeah. Well, Howard, I know you said you had discovered something at MomoCon you wanted to go over.
Oh, I have.
All right. Lay it on us.
So, MomoCon, interesting, this situation. Brian, my brother, he was running the whole section, and I was the assistant director. While I was there, during the Justice Life event, I ran across, there's a lot of GMs, and a lot of GMs would jump in on it. I mean, I played in a couple other GMs games, a couple of GMs played in my game. This is one guy named Trey, who jumped in on my game, and he was familiar with Savage Worlds, but he was not familiar with Shinetar, right? And at the time, I had 6 players, including him, that sort of showed up late, and unfortunately, halfway through the game, half my players left because it was a convention or whatever. It happens, but
Yeah.
the thing that struck me was, I've been considering it all weekend, is gaming is a skill. And each person has a unique technique. We don't really think of it in those terms because for most gamers, there's not a lot of science behind gaming. There's not a lot of study done for gamers because there's no money in it. But it really is it's a learned skill, and you can learn good habits and you learn bad habits. And part of the reason we started this podcast was to teach people good habits in gaming, and that's why I run panels about how to be a good GM and how to be a good player. And I have always considered myself, after however many years of doing this, I've always considered myself a fairly competent, player. And then I met Trey, and he had developed a technique that was the best player technique I have ever encountered in all of my years of gaming. And what's interesting is there's an indie game, and I need to contact him and find out exactly what it is, but there's apparently an indie game in which you gain extra bonuses on achieving on attacking or achieving skills based on how you describe the actual event. And the game itself has mechanics within it on how to describe events, how to describe your actions. And he said that was one of his and his home group's favorite systems, and after playing it for so many years, it just translated to other systems, and so he just got in the habit of describing his actions in a particular way in whatever system he ran. And it was absolutely fantastic. And if you'll indulge me, I'll give you a slight breakdown in kind of how it works.
Sure.
I have always espoused the belief that gamers fall into there's two extremes, and there's always somewhere in the middle. The two extremes are this. The one extreme, and it's as frustrating for GMs as it is for the other players, is you look at someone when it comes up to their turn, they roll a dice and they shout a number, or they tell you a number. So you look at, you're going around the table, and it's like, all right, Jim, what's your action? 12. That's not an action. That's a number. As a matter of fact, that's barely even a word. I mean, it's a single word. It's not even a sentence. It gives no information. There's nothing for which, for me to count. I don't know who's doing what. I don't know what the action is. I have no idea whether you just rolled a skill check, an attack check, or whether you were just randomly, suffering from an outburst of Tourette's. I have no concept of what 12 means. You have to give the GM some form of interaction. Then there's the other side, the other extreme, and I've actually had both of these in my games. More than just the numbers-based people, because D&D hack and slash oftentimes, especially in large-scale combat when people are tired of waiting for their turn, try to boil it down to they figure out what the target number for the enemy is, and they give you a number, or they just say hit. They don't say anything else. The other side of the spectrum are the people who, and these guys oftentimes come from old school, like play-by-post. They come from the freeform RPGs where there's no rules. They come from like narrative systems like Fate and stuff like that. But the extreme group are the ones that say, for example, you turn to say, "Hey Jim, what's your action?" And then they look at you for a second. They're like, "All right, I draw my trusty blade from its sheath. It shines with a glinting light in the moonlight. I stare deep into my opponent's eyes, showing him the rage that I have for his cause. I raise my blade high, and I bring it down with a mighty slash. The air whistles past my ears. There's a spray of blood and a scream. Fate itself turns. The man dies before my very eyes. I can feel his, and after a while you're just like, oh, Jesus Christ, shut up."
Actually, I wish I could get more of that in my game.
No, because the extremes actually tell you the result before they roll.
Yeah, that is true.
And therein lies the problem. They don't say they attempt, they tell you what they do, because in freeform narration, you say, "I do this to you," and then you rely on the other person to react. So you have these two extremes where you either get a single word hit or a single numerical number 12, or you get this long narration which slows down combat and makes it nearly impossible for the GM GM to actually understand what you're talking about, and then eventually becomes a diatribe. It slows down combat, and then when you dictate what actually happens as a result of your action, you take away the dice mechanic entirely, and you basically are doing the GM's job for him, and it makes it almost impossible for the GM to integrate your action into the whole story. Those are the two extremes. Okay, and most gamers fall somewhere in the middle. Some lean more toward the mechanics, and some lean more toward the narration. And yes, as a GM, we would all like people to be more narrative because 90% of people are the mechanics. They just yell hit or a number. They don't actually give you anything to go by. A much smaller section do the narrative, but most narrative players that come from the narrative background of the freeform RPGs have zero concept of a mechanic dice system dictating their actions, and oftentimes they don't like dice mechanics because of that. They're like, well,
met people like that.
Have you?
My ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, actually, her ex-boyfriend.
My
there you go.
ex-boyfriend ruined a few games because he was tired of the GM telling him what to do.
Yes, and therein lies. So therein lies. So those are your two extremes. And then I met Trey. Trey sits down at my table. He's another GM. He's a really nice guy, very upbeat, very fun-loving, and he chose one of the characters, and I said it before him. And then Trey took a moment, and he actually read his character sheet, all of it, which was like, I mean, I watched him do it, and he read. Wow. He's like, okay. He asked him questions. He said, well, I have a hindrance here. What does this exactly mean? And I said, well, it means this. He's like, oh, very good. And these are my equipment, okay? And can I throw this? Okay, good. All right, I think I'm good. And I'm like, I'm looking at him a little scant. I'm like, well, this is unusual.
Almost making you a little nervous, like,
Yeah, it was.
I have a good player in a con game. Where is this going to go wrong?
I have a player who, do you know how, I still have players that have been in games running longer than 5 years that still ask me simple things like, I don't know how to roll my attacks and damages. I'm like, the point is that most players never read their character sheet. They also never read hindrances and they never read edges unless there's a mechanical benefit. Anything that's role-playing gets thrown out the window. That's just the way it is. In a convention game, you're lucky to get people who can read dice. So this guy's sitting here and he's looking at me expectantly, and I'm like, okay. So I begin to roll the scene, and then in comes his character. And the first couple things, the narrative things, I could tell he was a narrative player at the beginning. So because he was like, everything I said, he add a little twist to it. And I was kind of watching him askance because I was like, oh crap, if I have one narrative guy in a group full of people who are not gamers, this is like their first experience, especially with the system, and don't know how to roll dice, this is going to be a bad day.
Yeah.
And then
especially at a convention.
Yeah.
Because you only got so much time.
And then combat started. And I dealt out the cards because Savage Worlds uses a card mechanic in order to dictate, and then his turn comes up. And I get around this turn, I'm like, all right, what does your Laren Sniper do? And as soon as I pointed at him, he knew what he wanted to do, which again was a shock. Like actually having a player who thought ahead of time about what they were going to do, so they had a plan. And his plan actually
Guilty of not doing that.
And this blew my mind. His plan, he hadn't decided it before. He hadn't decided before everyone else had acted. He listened to everyone else's plan, what everyone else did it, and he actually played on the other characters' actions. He actually maneuvered based on their actions. And I'm going, okay, what's happening? And then like the clouds opened up, and he got into character voice. He did my formula, which my formula is, and I've said it before, is who, I. He didn't say my character. He didn't say this guy. He didn't say, he said I. He said, I survey the field. I notice my, companion on the rock through the knife. I draw my bow, take aim at the bandit that he just hit. I hold a breath for a moment and then release the arrow. And he rolled dice. And he gave me the exact number I needed, and then he waited for my input.
Heaven forbid.
And I about started to weep openly.
But coming for Howard is definitely...
Wait, I'm not done. His second turn came up. And then he goes, can I close? And I'm like, yes, but you have a bow. He says, I understand that. He says, I run with my bow in hand. I draw my axe. And I throw my axe. And I'm like, wait, you're actually using another weapon? You're actually using the equipment on your sheet? You're actually using the axe to throw? Like, thematically? And I'm like, it's going to cost a -2. He said, I understand, but I feel that that's what would be best in this situation. Roll it. He killed the dude. And I'm like, that is awesome. He goes, the next turn, he runs up. He says, I run by, I stop, I pull the axe. I pull the axe from the body, and as I charge forward, because as I hear my companions in trouble on the other side of the woods, and he starts running through the woods. Later on in the combat, he drew his shield and actually held the shield with the bow in one hand, or had a crossbow because he was switching weapons. He was actually switching weapons, dropping them and remembering where he dropped them, which I couldn't even imagine. Like I'm like, you actually kept track of what you dropped where? Who are you? and then he's like, I have the shield and the crossbow. I use the shield as a platform. Lay the crossbow. Fire the crossbow. Then the next turn he said, I just fired my crossbow. I dropped the crossbow, pick up the axe where it was stuck in the ground at my feet, and hurl it at the second guy, the second bandit. And then and he did it in voice. Like, he used all of his abilities. He used his hindrances. He actually emoted what he was doing. But notice, none of his descriptions took more than 5 seconds.
Yeah.
He told me what he was doing, to whom, how he was doing it, without dragging the game down, and he had energy. It was the most amazing display I have ever seen in a game. Then, I'm not done yet. I am not done. 2 players got up, and he said, I'll take them. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see what this guy could do with 3 characters.
Oh, geez.
Not only did he run 3 characters, but he ran each of them in a separate voice using their special abilities.
What the hell?
To adapt. Yes!
Even I'm not good. That good.
I can only do... I've done 2 before, and... Yeah, I can't keep them separate.
On the fly, he gave each of them a separate voice. He used their unique special abilities and unique equipment. And he used them as a unit to work with each other, playing off of each other, because they'd entered the combat as a team, and he continued to use them as a team, also playing off what the other players had previously done to try to keep the vein of that character. So the orc was very aggressive, the goblin was very sneaky.
I can't do that in free form.
I am telling you, it was amazing. But the key to it is first, he read his character sheet. He understood the advantages and disadvantages, or edges and hindrances that this character had, and he used them for roleplay purposes. He used his equipment uniquely in that he did not just shoot every shot. Sometimes he threw an axe. Sometimes he fought with an axe. Sometimes he fought with a shield. Sometimes he fought with a bow. Sometimes he fought with a crossbow. He also kept in mind what equipment he could use and what he couldn't. He didn't try to dual wield a 2-handed bow, a 1-handed crossbow, and a 1-handed sword at the same round. He had actually drop equipment and pick equipment up thematically appropriately and what physically could actually happen. When he described his actions, he always spoke in first person. He said, I. He would indicate very clearly what target he was shooting at or attempting. He would emote briefly but colorfully what the action was or what the type of attack was. And then he would roll it, roll the dice and give me a composite number, plus minus, because he took some time to learn the system, plus minus. So he didn't just give me a random series of numbers. He actually gave me the final number for me to quickly be able to determine whether he succeeded or failed. And then no matter what happened with the dice, if he missed, he went with it. He didn't get upset. He didn't slow down. He continued, and he was upbeat the entire time. His energy just infused the rest of the party with that same energy, and they began to become more excited about the game just because he was excited about the game. And he maintained it through the entire part with 3 different characters and 3 different voices. That, my friends, is exquisite gameplay.
Well, don't I feel like a tool now? No.
Seriously?
No, actually, that's definitely. I'm feeling like that's something that we all need to frickin' strive for.
Yes. Oh, yes, most definitely.
Please tell me you actually got like his contact info.
I have his email. I am going to contact him, and
we need to get him on the fucking podcast.
That's what I'm going
to get him on the podcast, and I for one would like to game with this guy.
I will pay this guy money to teach me.
Seriously, like actually,
I've been gaming for, as I just stated, 19 years.
He's based out of Atlanta, and I floated the idea of possibly getting him to come to one of my local Shantar games to NPC the guy he played in the game as like a wandering whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
To come in, and possibly some other players could actually see this in action. It was surprising enough to warrant special attention. And it was really funny when I brought it up. He seemed to be very sort of self-deprecating about it. He's like, I didn't really, he himself didn't think it was anything that special because he does it all the time. And apparently his whole party, his home game, wherever they are in Atlanta, apparently this is how they all are.
Jeez.
Which means it is a skill that can be taught and translated. But the kicker is...
Now, I do know of some systems, because you said that he said that he had developed this because the system they had played rewarded,
yes,
description and whatnot. I do know of some mechanics that actually Exalted has one, stunt dice. If you explain out your action, and of course Exalted is supposed to be a very anime epic type setting to begin with, so if you do something very epic and explain it out well, the GM can award up to 3 dice to add to your dice pool for making the attempt. And then I can see Fate, with the Fate points, and even actually Savage Worlds with bennies. I occasionally will award character points, but my thing, and I actually kind of want your input on this, Howard. My thing is I've tried to implement similar things. Like, actually, I remember at one point in time, because my Star Wars game that I'm running on D6 was getting very, like, okay, what are you doing? Attacking with my lightsaber, I rolled such and such. And I find that it was like, I was adding in, as the GM, I was adding in the actions. Like,
yeah.
Okay, so you swing your saber, and he blocks, and so, because you didn't hit. But so I remember at one point in time, I was like, all right, guys, I want you all to explain out your actions more. So I was like, I will add anywhere from a +1 to a +3 to the roll. And I don't know if it was like I kept forgetting about it or they kept forgetting about it, but I think it lasted a whopping 2 sessions.
Well, that's the thing. This needs to be learned. But let me. There's a few key points I need to stress. One of the things is you give people license to do this. You encourage this, and what you end up often getting is, and it's actually one of the problems I ran in when I was running a long time ago. I ran you and Jinxie, and Jinxie in your games always does stuff out of the box. Everything he does is crazy. Everything he does is magical. But the problem is that oftentimes, and we actually got into loggerheads about this at one point. I allowed you to go ahead and do something. We came to a compromise. And I find it in some of my other gamers that they always want to do something unique, so much so that it becomes like a Rube Goldberg machine, for their turn, where they're like, well, I'm going to shoot that thing that's going to knock that thing down, that's going to drop this, and it's like after a while, I'm like, just shoot the guy in the face. That's what you do. And what I'm talking about is that it seems people always want to go to an extreme. So either they go to the extreme of laziness, where they just yell hit or a number, or they go to the extreme of they want to take over complete control of all scenes, and the narration becomes detrimental rather than complementary. Whereas with his style, his explanations, like I said, no turn that he did, no explanation for his actions took more than about between 5 to 10 seconds. They were colorful, they were on point, but he never tried to do anything. Like, he never tried to bounce an axe off a rock and hit somebody. He never tried to, do a flying, tumbling leap and shoot someone mid-somersault. None of that crap. His stuff was very colorful, very well described. He described emotion. He described intention. He described, tension. But he did it in such a way that was quick, concise, colorful, clear, and just very focused. And that's where a lot of games, with the rewarding. I wasn't rewarding him for this. That's another thing. He did it without reward. Yeah. For him, the reward was an internal.
It was good gaming.
Good gaming. He enjoyed the game more. I enjoyed the game more. And that's what I'm talking about, is that, rewarding it is great. And, if some people want to incentivize it, that's fine. But what I'm suggesting is, why not a cultural revolution? Why not begin to encourage this kind of style? Start off the games and stop games when people stop doing it. Basically be like, all right, guys, we're getting back into the pattern again. Let's take a step back. Let's take a breath. Let's get back into describing our actions. And again, if the description takes more than about 5 to 10 seconds, it's too long.
Yeah. Now, I remember one player I had that he didn't get the free form over, taking over everything descriptiveness. He got descriptive. The problem was that he got descriptive to the point to where it would have required multiple rounds to cover everything he still did it quickly. I mean, he was still like, I want to jump up, grab this, toss this at him. You know, he did it well, but I was like, okay, dude, that's like 6 actions.
Yes.
You know, I was like, and this system doesn't really have like a multi-action penalty, like it, because I think we were running Fate at the time. So I was like, this system doesn't really have a multi-action penalty like D6 does, dude. So you could do like this and this round, and then of course, you know, as the combat as the combat came to more fruition, he couldn't continue doing what he was doing. Now, thankfully, he didn't get too miffed at it that he couldn't do everything he wanted to. He did try to adjust his strategy. The problem is that I think he wanted to do a lot more setup to something epic, and he didn't have the time for it.
And that is another problem that people are having. And again, this is what I'm talking about. What you're talking about is the extreme examples, because players tend to go to extreme, always.
Yeah.
And again, the technique that Trey was displaying didn't do that. He relied on every round he adjusted his strategy, but he always keyed off what was going on in the situation. And he did some amazingly cool stuff. He really actually, like the throwing of the axe and the shooting and the switching of weapons, but he was very conscious of how many actions he had. Shintar has move as a free action, up to your pace, and you can do a single action. If you do more than one action, it's a -2 penalty. But you can never do the same action twice, i.e. you can't hit with the same weapon twice. You couldn't shoot the same bow twice. If you have 2 weapons, you can hit with both of them, but then you incur the multi-action penalties. And again, he was aware enough of the setting and the system never to hit that point. And he would say, I'm gonna do this and this, and I'd be like, multi-action penalties. He's like, I understand that. And when he rolled, he calculated it into. You're right, that is a huge problem, and I have some gamers that do that. They want to do 7 rounds worth of actions in a single round, and you can't do that because situations are always changing. Yeah. But again, Trey was very focused, and each round was a separate entity, and he did only what he could do in that round.
Yeah, and also because I know you mentioned, the whole reward thing. I think the rewarding would be good at least to start it off. Mm-hmm. To get people in the habit of it, because like you said, Howard, I mean, a lot of people are going to the extremes, and even as you pointed out with characters and character sheets, a lot of times people will go into the extremes of the mechanics. What gives them the best benefit, mechanics wise, than story wise. So, okay, now my brain is really working its gears.
Is everything okay?
No, yeah, I just had a thought. I was just like, well, instead of rewarding mechanically, maybe trying to find a way of rewarding story.
Yes.
So if you do something really epic in the game, maybe try to work into the story a bit of a reward. That again, kind of, because if the people, and I guess you would have to adjust it depending on your group, because if the group is really focused on mechanics, try to pull them more into the narrative. If they're too narrative, pull them more into the mechanic to try to help balance it all out.
I agree.
But sometimes people who are more mechanically focused, and this is something that's come up in a couple, I'm subscribed to a few newsletters and things, is give them mechanical rewards for doing good role-playing, and then slowly ease off in the mechanical stuff and more into the role-playing stuff as they get better. As a way to tailor their incentives towards their interests. Which is like, when you have to clean your room, but you don't want to. I just recently stopped being a teenager, so we'll go with that. You say, if I clean up or whatever, then I get to eat ice cream. But if the person doesn't like ice cream, then that's not really a good reward. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And he learned his technique via a role-playing system, which mechanically rewarded players for good description. So he actually learned his through the mechanic reward. But then, by the time he became a learned trait, he no longer needed the reward. It's textbook psychology, Pavlov's dog. But there are 2 other things I want to bring up here about what he did. The first is the energy. Every time he did his actions, he did it with enthusiasm, no matter what it was, no matter whether the situation went good for him or poorly. He always did it with energy. He took ownership of the moment of the character and did it in a voice, not a funny voice. I'm talking about you could feel the passion. You could feel when he fired, he was in his mind firing. He visualized it, and you could feel it. The other thing that he didn't do, and this was amazing, is he didn't interrupt other players on their turn or out. There was a little out of game banter, and he enjoyed it, but he never allowed it to get too far. And when his turn came on, he was focused. There was none of this in the middle of it asking questions. When he wanted to ask me a question, he asked it on his turn, and it was a very simple, he'd ask me a simple question and get done quickly. I rarely had to go through the rules for him, because if he realized it was going to slow from the game, he'd go, okay, never mind, we'll work on that later. Let me do something else. He was very conscious of the flow of the game, of the flow of the other characters. He never once talked over anyone else. He allowed everyone else to speak on their turns. It was perfect role-playing respect of the other players and of the GM. He worked with me. He helped me help other people. And if you had an entire party of this, if you had a room full of gamers with this particular technique, then I could see the games going as epically as they do in our minds as we want them to, because there was not constant breakdown of out-of-game information. There wasn't constant banter drowning people out. There wasn't this constant, two people having a side conversation which detracted from the game. His turn never slowed anything down. As a matter of fact, it was almost like when you're playing Mario Kart and you hit that boost, and you speeds up. His turn actually sped up the game because the energy he put into it, and the other players then would play off him. If I had 5 people with that same technique, and every time I hit their turn, they were ready to go and they pushed the game forward, we could do combat almost as fast as it would happen. It would be epic and fun.
Heaven forbid.
Indeed. But he said it was a learned trait. That's the thing that I'm talking about. The only thing that makes him unique is the fact that he learned it and he exemplified it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is attainable for us all. And
Reach it.
I hope we do. But in our games, as a GM, I need to make sure that each player gets playtime. I also need to make sure that the out-of-game conversation doesn't detract or drown. We always talk about that, but what I'm talking about is even discussion about the game out of game can slow it down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And another thing is when you come up to a thing like, for example, he would do, another player would do something, and then he wouldn't do something to countermand that other player. For example, in the Epic game, when we first stepped onto the floating citadel, right?
Mm-hmm.
My character is in no way the leader, but he is a prince, and so he does sort of have that aura about him. So we stepped onto the dock. We addressed the dockmaster, and my first thing to do was to look to the bard, who is basically the mouthpiece for our party, because, well, hell, she's got the highest charisma, and that's what she does.
Who happens to be played by Miri.
However, instantly, another player character looked at me, and then another player looked at the side,
Yeah.
and another player character looked at the ground.
What happened was your character looked at me, my character looked at your character, and then everybody else started pointing at which one of us they thought should speak.
And then people started talking over each other, and eventually I had to step in and calm the situation down. But using his technique, what would have happened is we would step up. The first character would have made a play. I would have looked at Anaya. Then Anaya would have then talked, because the other player characters would have read whoever took the initiative, because that was out of combat. But still, there is an initiative. I took the initiative by looking at another. Instead of it becoming a free-for-all, everyone looking at everyone else, and it degenerating into madness, in which case the poor dockmaster got as flustered as we were because he had no idea who to talk to. Instead of doing that, the other player characters would have read the situation as he read the other player characters in combat and reacted to it. So instead of anyone else looking at anyone else, then Anaya would have stepped up. Unless there was a situation in which your character would then not have had a reason to do so, which, being the bard and the spokesperson of the group, there would be no reason to. But do you see what I mean about reading the situation?
Mm-hmm. And what I was saying that my character thought that you should speak because you are the prince, you're the ambassador, and then everybody else just kind of took that to go everywhere else, because my character still thinks of you as the leader.
They took you looking at him as not confident enough, and so therefore, that the chain of command was broken.
But again, what we're talking about is that's a non-combat situation versus a combat situation. So initiative and stuff gets a little weird. But again, everything that happened after that moment just degenerated into madness because nobody was reading the situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes total sense.
They were just going off on their own tangent, and then the whole thing fell apart. We looked like a bunch of morons, honestly. If that were a real situation, I was that dockmaster. I'd have been like, security, clean up on aisle 3, because I mean, you got these guys rolling up, and then they're basically talking over each other. I mean, it was a complete cock up. But the situation could have gone like this: we step off. He addresses us. I look at Anaya. Anaya looks at me questioningly. I give her the nod, like, please, and she speaks. Perfect. Incidentally, Anaya ended up doing the talking anyway, right?
Between her and Ella, yeah.
But Anaya was the one who actually came through flowery language, and because Ella was stumbling a little bit, but Anaya actually took charge and did what bards do. Am I wrong?
Nope.
Correct. So my character's initial assumption to allow the bard to speak ended up being borne out being correct. But again, what I'm talking about is when I was watching Trey, like, that's what I'm talking about, even in combat. You were talking about your character doing like 6 or 7 actions in one, like 7 rounds, whatever. Because there was a lack of situational awareness, a lack of what's going on. And by doing that, he was not playing off the other characters, because he was saying, I want to do this whole string of actions. Be damned what anyone else in the party's going to do. Now, he did later on change it because of the situation, but his initial mindset is, I'm going to do the string of actions no matter what else happens. And as players, we've got to be playing off of each other. Like combos, almost. Both out of combat and in combat. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And yes, some people are better able to read the mood of a room than others. There are some people who are more socially adept. But as gamers, as a party who have been together for a little bit longer, we should be able to do that and allow the people to shine in the areas that they shine. And you do amazing at being the talker. You really do.
I'm absolutely terrible at it.
No, you're not.
No, you're not. You're actually one of the best speakers.
First and foremost, Howard does not BS.
No, I don't.
If he's saying it, he means it.
Yes. You took the situation in charge. The way you spoke, you apologized for sort of the, let's say, flubs that the other characters were saying, and you smoothed the ruffled feathers, and you got the point across sweetly and kindly. And even I was listening to you. So you did a fantastic job as that. And again, you have displayed repeatedly an ability to do that. So your character is the bard, so let bards do what bards do type thing. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And
I always have a tendency to feel, underconfident about my abilities because I honestly have been gaming nowhere near as long as you guys have.
Well,
yes, but apparently you come from good stock and had good training prior to set up a good foundation. Because first and foremost, Miri, I'm going to say this. I mean, you know full well, and Howard has actually backed me up on this more than once. I handpicked the players for the Epic game. I addressed this in the last episode as well. And again, I apologize for those that didn't get notified of it, but again, there were a lot of factors, and I'm hoping to rectify that the next time. But I handpicked the players. And if you remember correctly, I wanted you in the game from the off. Mm-hmm. But originally your schedule wasn't, didn't initially allow for it, so I compensated. But then your schedule allowed it.
Unemployment is a wonderful thing.
Huh?
Unemployment is a wonderful thing.
It can be for gaming. Actually, that's how Glenn Welsh got his the whole list of things Mr. Welsh is no longer allowed to do in an RP. That's where most of it came from, was when he got unemployed. Because we asked him on the podcast. But I mean, I handpicked the group. And originally you were one of the ones I even am pushing myself a little beyond my comfort zone of how many people I am comfortable running online to make sure you're in this bloody game. So that in of itself should tell you your caliber to begin with. And then the fact that Howard has constantly complimented me on my choices of the people in this game, to as to how well that I definitely picked the right group. That also should basically tell you know what you're doing.
Yes.
Mostly though, it's me trying not to do the things that my dad used to come home ranting about his players doing.
Well, and that's actually good to keep in mind,
hmm
but you also, I think you're doubting yourself too much sometimes.
hmm
You
Anyway,
you are
Howard had
second.
say.
So what?
I said Howard had something to say.
Oh,
Please.
no, but Byron is correct. I don't lie, actually. I am brutally honest, unfortunately, and it gets me into a lot of trouble. But the long and the short of it is talent and skill make up for a lot, and obviously you've been trained well. Um, Being a talking character is hard. I do it all the time. I enjoy it, but it's hard. Because being put on the spot, and it's not difficult to talk like we're talking, but it's difficult to talk in someone else's voice. So you're trying, because there's a barrier between what you're saying and what you're thinking, because you're trying to think as somebody else and talk. It's almost like trying to speak in a second language. I mean, there's always a stilt to it that's always difficult. You seem to be able to do it at will on the fly, which is unique, because most gamers, if you ever hear most gamers give a speech, it's like, so guys, we're gonna because they're trying to stall, because they're trying to think. What they're thinking is to think, all right, my character would say what, and it slows them down. Few players I've ran into have the ability to speak fluently, calmly, and normally, thinking in another voice. You have that talent. It's unique, and it's very good to have.
Oh, that's actually also a trained skill, to be honest. I've been writing for about as long as I've been reading. And also, I got a lot of my roleplay experience comes from freeform roleplaying, where there is a lot of
Well,
there's a lot of influence, emphasis in the community on writing and talking and thinking in character, because it's basically like writing a collaborative novel. So it's something that I've had a lot of practice with.
And it shows. And yes, all of the thing I'm trying to say, and you confirmed exactly what I've been trying to say. Great way to do that. Is that these are learned skills. We can all do this. That's what I'm trying to say, is that this is not something that, some guy at a convention did that we all applaud him and move on. What I mean is this is something for us to aspire to, because these are learnable skills. We can all achieve this to a greater or lesser extent. But in reality, just the attempt would improve our gameplay astronomically, mine included. And and so we're all aware, he was standing there when I was talking about this, and I told him to his face, I said, he said, you are a better player than I am. Your skill, your technique at playing is better than mine. I'm going to get as good as you are. I'm going to learn how to do it, and when I say that, I'm going to figure it out. But for the moment, you have shown me a better technique for doing what I love to do.
I say, Miri, it sounded like you had something to say there.
Oh, it's interesting to think about. I mean, the psychology of everything, and that's kind of been one of the things that I aspire to. It's really nice to hear that people say that I talk well, because I actually have a problem with social situations. Like, well, a lot of gamers do. Haha, that's the joke. But I actually literally
isn't that funny? Gamers having social issues, yet their favorite thing to do is a social interaction.
But I think maybe one of the reasons is that learning how to interact in character teaches us better how to interact with each other out of character too. So in some ways, learning skills in gaming is learning skills in life.
In a lot of cases, it translates over.
Very much.
And another thing is have you ever known cosplayers who, when they're not cosplaying, are very quiet, introspective, nervous, awkward people, that they put on that costume and suddenly they're something else? People who are social
cosplayers.
Really, people who are socially awkward, when they're speaking as a character, they're able to express themselves better than as a person, because it's through a character. So the character is vulnerable, but they're not. So it's a social shield.
That's actually a tactic that Liz has tried using when she goes to conventions and has a table at Artist Alley. When she's trying to sell her comic and whatnot, because normally she's very introverted. But you get her talking about her comic, and she can go a mile a minute. But you have to break that barrier. So one way that she did was she actually dressed up. She cosplayed, in essence, the main character from her book, to kind of get the character's confidence and to kind of get into character to be able to better approach, and talk to people and kind of break that last barrier for herself to be able to try to sell it better. So it's very similar.
Yes, and it's one of the reasons that roleplay is such an escape, because we can experience things that we normally could not otherwise experience. It allows us to do things that we could not otherwise do. And keep in mind, yes, it is fantasy, yes, it is in our minds, but from a psychological perspective, we think, therefore we are.
Yep.
And yes, things translate across. As she said, things do translate. Skills translate across. The ability to speak translates across. Confidence comes across. I mean, I've learned a great deal of during the time before I went into psychology professionally. During high school and college, I used games to manipulate my friends to see what would happen, and I screwed around with them in game using the GM screen as sort of a shield to allow me to sort of pull this, push this lever, push that button to see how they would react emotionally if I did this or that. And I learned a great deal about psychology and how to understand people just by understanding players.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Actually, I've always stated, I even actually said this in an interview once. I was asked in an interview, how would you build a better relation with a client? And I joked, I was like, well, normally I'd play a role-playing game with them, but since I can't do that, because that is one of the best ways that I get to know people, because thanks a lot to actually what Howard taught me at high school. Yes.
I may actually have to go. I'm sorry. The thing that we talked about before the podcast, I have something to do tonight, and I just got a call from that person, so.
Oh, okay. No, not a problem.
So it was good being here.
yeah. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully it won't be the last time.
Well, hopefully. I've had a lot of fun. I hope people don't think that I was talking too much.
I seriously, next to me, yeah, no, because I actually have had people tell me to shut up in my own podcast before. So,
wow.
Yeah, Salo in one of his comments in one of the episodes was like, Byron, sometimes you just need to shut up. I was like, oh, thanks. But anyway, go do your thing. But thank you for joining us, and
You're welcome.
and I will contact you later about editing this.
Well, I'll get it up. Thank you all for having me, and thank you to our listeners, however many of them there actually are.
Nice.
5, 8, 12 of them, however many we have now. So, all right.
Thank
Not a problem. Go do your thing.
you. Goodbye.
Night. Okay. Where was I?
Oh,
yeah.
you're talking about
How like what you taught me in high school and whatnot is the best way that I get to know people is by gaming with them, because when I'm GMing, especially when I'm GMing, I can really start getting into their heads. Now, unfortunately, it's not perfect. I've made some missed calls. I've underestimated some people, overestimated others, but overall, my track record's got a pretty good percentage to it. So,
Yes, I agree.
So, does it just me, or does it feel like some of the energy just kind of left with her?
It did. It always does.
Yeah, it does.
But no, all I want to say is that there's a technique that I found that I think that we need to begin to propagate.
Yeah, most definitely. In fact, I mean, just with what you've said, like I just said earlier, I've been gaming 19 years, and I feel like a schmuck now.
How would you like to be sitting at the table and be schooled by this guy? Like, really, honestly, but it was amazing.
I probably would have been bowing at his feet.
I mean, it really was. It was incredible to watch, and it's something that I'm going to try, in the Epic game and other games to try to capture something of what he did and continue to improve. But what it means is we have something now to aspire to, some improvement in our own self, and we can't expect our players to do this if we are unwilling to do so.
Yeah.
Put as much effort into your player character as you do into your favorite NPCs. Think about it that way. I mean, we put so much love into our NPCs, and then we go in someone else's game, and we're like, okay, whatever. I hit that thing.
Well, I mean, I want to say that I do try to put some energy into my character. I have issues maintaining that energy,
Yeah.
depending on what. Because I mean, if a combat does drag on, even I'll say it. Even when I'm a player, even I'll feel like, oh my god, this combat feels like it's gone forever. Look, just fucking swing my sword, just fucking kill it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always try to be I do try to practice what I preach or what I want to see in my other players, but I'll fully admit that I don't. I either don't maintain it or I'm not always successful. I'm not trying to say it's like, oh yeah, I always do that. No, fuck no. I've dropped the ball. I'll admit it. I have no qualms about admitting it.
No, and I have been not as participative in like for the Epic campaign. I have hardly lived up to this ideal. Now, there are always mitigating circumstances, but the bottom line is that we shouldn't make excuses for ourselves. We should admit when we have fallen flat. Yeah. And just try. The point is that we can always do better. That's what I'm saying is we can learn how to do this, and I have seen it in action, and it is a beautiful thing to watch. If we could get at least 50% of the gamers to subscribe to this concept of, again, energy, speak in a voice, speak in first person, describe your action, but do it colorfully, do it with energy, do it like in a voice, but do it simply, concisely, and quickly.
Yeah.
Have an understanding of the mechanics, roll your dice, and give the GM correct information, timely information, and do it in such a way that they can react to what you said, and by all means.
Yeah, that's and that's. Sorry to interrupt, but
go ahead.
That's another thing actually I had in my Star Wars game this last weekend, but the weekend before, where I'm pretty much going to have to put in a mandate of once the dice start rolling, those are your actions.
Yes.
Because I had one guy, he's like, okay, I want to do this, 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 and this. And I was like, okay, that's multi-action, but you can do it. I'm going to say you can do it. Just give me these rolls. It's going to be at these minuses. He made the rolls, and then at the tail end, he was like, and then I'm going to do this. And I'm like, no. Because you didn't tell me beforehand. That's like another 2 actions. That would have adjusted the penalties to your rolls. So no. I'm going to have to say, no, you don't. Because you didn't tell me beforehand. And this isn't the first time that he's done this. And some of the other players, too. Or, and sometimes what irks me is, like, they'll be like, I want to do this great epic thing. And I'm like, well, you're a first-level character.
Yep.
You really can't. But you can do this and this. It'll have these penalties to it. But, I'll try to compromise, and they'll be like, screw it. I'll just, swing my sword. And I'm just like, motherfuckers, I'm trying to work with you here.
Again, and that's the thing is that when things don't go your way, don't give up. Don't get defeatist. Don't get into a spiral because we all have days when the dice turn on us. I've had it before, but
heck yes.
Keep the energy up, keep it into character, and keep striving. But again, it is a technique that we can learn, and constrain your actions to the limits of what a round in your particular setting can do, however many actions they are. Play on the other characters. Pay attention to what they're doing and adjust your action to theirs. Because more often than not in combat, it's like the minute combat starts, everyone just scatters and does their own thing, and no one's paying attention. There's no tactics. There's no collaboration. Everyone basically is running their own combat. There's no cooperation. Watching this player, the other players weren't paying any attention to each other. They were just shooting whatever target they were, but he was actually playing off them. If one of them is shaken, because we're shadows rolls, if one of them shook a target, he'd try to hit that target to kill it, capitalizing on the shake. I mean, he worked with the other players, even though they more or less ignored what he was doing. But seeing him, I'm thinking, wow, if I had 3 or 4 of him, or players that played with that style, the combat would be very fast-moving, cooperative, very thematically flowing, and it would be extremely epic, fast-paced, high impact. It was interesting to watch because again he played off the other people. He didn't just ignore everything that was going on and get tunnel vision on one enemy. He didn't always shoot the same enemy too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in this first round that enemy was the most critical, but the next round situations changed and that enemy became so he'd change targets. He actually had the capacity to think beyond kill. Because he based his actions on everyone else's actions, including the GM's. It was it was very enlightening to watch.
Hmm.
So I mean, there's a lot in there. Like I said, I mean, you brought up a lot of good points about people trying to do too many actions in a round. People not paying attention to other players, people not being aware of what their character can do, people not bothering to read their character sheets.
Yeah.
So, which should be gaming 101, but it isn't.
Yeah. Especially when like you've created the character. You should know what the character can do. Now, granted, I understand like if someone else has created the character, and had a mindset, because like in the Epic game, like I created Puff and Miri's characters. But I try to convey just, the purposes behind the characters, but I also was like, read the character sheet, know what your character can do. And I guess some people kind of, find a gun and stick to it kind of thing of, because, like Puff, I mean, she's a sorceress. She's, dragon blooded, almost, becoming a half dragon. So she knows that her primary thing is blow shit up.
Yeah.
But
combat characters are good.
Well, but I'm saying, but like, out of game, she's working around not wanting to always blow shit up. But in a fight, I've tried to push her to be, like, not every spell you have is a ghost-splody spell.
Yeah.
Use your options type of thing. So.
Yes, and he also used multiple options. He was using options that I hadn't even thought of. Anyway, what I'm saying is
yeah, that's just it. I think we're starting to beat the dead horse here.
That's what I'm saying. Incidentally, oh, by the way, I put a link to the Epic, or to my JNL setup. I don't know if you saw that. The castle in the group chat.
Actually, when I clicked that link, it just came up with Google Plus.
Ooh. So apparently there's a problem with it. Give me 1 second.
So, but yeah, go. When you figure that out, I'll post it up in the comments for this episode and whatnot. So, but yeah, I'm thinking we can start wrapping this up.
I think we can,
because otherwise we've already been repeating ourselves some.
We have indeed.
So unless you got anything different.
No, I think that's a lot of meat for one, and I do think it's something that next Epic game, I think it's something that we need to work on, I need to work on, and I really need to push it forward.
Okay. So, I'm not going to lie, there's a part of me that's kind of glad to hear that after our last discussion, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, and I need to understand that the other player characters are not necessarily going to respect. They're not going to have the same mentality. And again, I'm just going to have to just keep in mind that there are other people who have different perspectives on gaming.
No, and you're good at this, dude. Lead by example.
And that's what I'm going to have to do.
Yep.
I mean, I'll be trying to be more participative. I do want to still keep a light touch because I don't want to end up trying to people feel I'm muscling them out of the way again like they did before. But
or to be the point where they're just throwing themselves at you. Because that's a thing that can happen too. Not just, you stealing the spotlight. People could, because I've seen this happen too. I've seen people just giving the spotlight to someone else.
Yes.
Even when you're trying to have it focus on them, they're like, no, give it to them. I'm like, no, this is for you, you bastard. But so that's something we gotta worry about too. But anyway, that's for another episode.
Yes, it is.
So anyway, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything you would like for us to discuss or cover, or got your own story or whatnot. You can tweet us, although I need to get back on the Twitter account now that I think about it. Okay. You can tweet us. You can email us, post on the blog, or comment on the YouTube. Yay! Yay! We have YouTube, which Miri's going to be helping me with as well.
Cool.
So
glad you brought her too.
Yeah, I am glad too. I hope I'm actually going to make sure she actually listens to this episode. So she can hear this last part that we're still talking about her, and how good she is. So, but anyway, thank you for joining us this week. Hopefully you will join us next week. There should be a next week.
Hopefully.
I will fully admit things are very crazy. There's still a lot of travel in my future. But I'm going to try to make sure this still stays weekly. I'll just have to work out a time with you to record the next one.
Yep.
So, but again, thank you for joining us this week, and I have been your GM, Byron.
I've been your co-host, Howard.
I said, you almost said cohort, didn't you?
I know, I'm trying to. It's new.
Yep, yeah, I know. No, it's okay, I know. So just remember the motto of Ropi Gamma is roll high, play well, die hard.